And now back to Bobby Likis Car Clinic and your host, Bobby Likis.
Just go to California and take a call from Dan. Dan, welcome to Bobby Likis Car Clinic. Glad to have you join us.
Well, thanks for having my call, Bobby.
Sure, my pleasure. What can I do for you?
Well, I recently purchased a 2004 Ford F-150. It's got the 5.4-liter V8, and I know there's difficulties in removing the spark plugs, and I'm calling to get your advice on that.
Well, there is a difficulty, and I don't think that the 4 is going to give you nearly the challenges that an 06 or 7. I'm not sure about the brake year, but I do know that 07 3-valve Ford heads, the spark plug had an extended tip, and let's just call it, in your mind picture a spark plug, Dan, and then add almost an inch shank onto the spark plug. And so what you do is, rather than the spark plug screws in the head, but what you really want, you want the fire to start deeper down in the chamber. And so imagine that, which that's better for emissions and better for the flame front. So imagine that you were building a fire in the woods, and you want to make the fire, you put the kindle and the light wood over it. Well, what's the best way? The best way to do that would be to stack the wood like a teepee, and then start the fire in the very center. That's why the hemispherical combustion chambers work so well on racing engines, because of the hemispherical chamber, and the spark plug can be centrally located. Well, you can't do that with a wedge combustion chamber, and that's what the Ford has, and most engines do have that. So you put the spark plug down in a hole. Well, you can't do that because it's in the head. So what you do is you extend the tip of the spark plug, but you can't do that because it's ceramic. So you have to put a metal shank, like the rifle barrel, and it literally was just like, if you could think a round metal cylinder made of adequate metal attached to the spark plug. And Dan, that's where the problem comes in. It was crimped.
Okay.
It was crimped onto the end of the spark plug, and the shank, of course, the spark plug had threads on it. The shank did not have threads, obviously, because it pierced and went through the hole of the cylinder head chamber and stuck out down in the chamber, and that's where the electrode was and where the ground strap was. So it was really terrific.
Yes.
for emissions. Now, here's what happens in a chamber. Carbon builds up. And so when carbon builds up, it builds on the piston top and the combustion chamber, and also anything that's in the chamber, like this shank sticking out in the chamber. So if you can imagine taking a paint stirrer stick, and then stirring the paint, and then taking the stick, and then taking a rag and squeegeeing the paint off the stick. I mean, that's graphically, you see where I'm doing there. Well, the problem with carbon is it dries like paint, and it dries and it coats up, and then overnight it coats up. So the shank gets totally engrossed and covered like the barnacles of a ship with this hardened carbon. So when you loosen the plug and then unscrew the plug, as you're unscrewing the plug, you're trying to smear or pull that hardened carbon off that shank. Well, it can't do that. So the shank will dislodge and from the crimped position on the spark plug, and you get the plug out and the shank stays in there, and so does the ceramic and the center electrode of the spark plug. And I mean, if folks, you can Google the internet, spark plug breaking a Ford head. Really? It's just tons and tons of them. So we actually had one gentleman that worked in our shop, and of the 8 spark plugs of this one 07 Ford, he broke 5 getting them out. 5 out of 8. And when you break them, there's an aftermarket makes a special tool, and you screw it in the spark plug hole, and it's got a special little spreader, and it goes in, and it grasps from the inside like an easy out, and extracts that piece, hopefully. And if not, you have to pull the head apart. And now somebody comes in for a spark plug and they're spending $5,000 or $3,000. What's wrong with that picture? So we said, we got to fix this. Well, in fact, Johnny Bars, who is our lead ASE shop technician, is the person that went over to help this other technician to get those 5 plugs out of that head, and he managed to extract all 5 without having to take the engine apart. But I can tell you, we had no less than 6 hours of our time and labor in that. So if you're in that position, here's how you can get those plugs out without any of that, without worrying about it. Number one, we took, and this is a product that you hear me talk about. It's a Berryman, actually the Berryman B12 Chem Tool is a fuel injection cleaner. It's a fuel system cleaner, but they make a 3-part kit that is it's a 3-part fuel injection kit. So what we do is we service the engine. And we tell this to the customer. We service the engine, the injector, and the combustion chamber the night before we pull the spark plugs out. And Dan, therein lies. See, here's the bottom line. Except for torching something, you can't possibly disintegrate carbon. Just like an oven, the oven does torch. That's how you clean an oven, is you lock it down and raise it and elevate the temperature and literally oxidize all that old food that's hardened. Otherwise, you never get it out.
Yes.
Well, in an engine, you can't do that. So what we do is we go the opposite direction. We use the Berryman products, and we soften, and then we run the engine. This is the night before. We run the engine and let it run, but we don't finish the job. We leave a heavy dose of the Berryman B12 Chem Tool, which is a severe, well, actually B60 is their most powerful. So we'll use that, and that softens the carbon. We let that truck sit over, well, I say truck because that's usually what it is in F-150s. What kind of car do you drive?
The F-150.
Yeah, well, okay, so we let that F-150 sit overnight. Then we come in the next morning with that cold engine, and we loosen the plug about on a scale of say a noon, maybe 1 hour or 5 minutes.
Okay.
5 minutes, let's say, of an hour. Not an hour. I don't mean at 360 degree. I mean 5 minutes of turn, just enough. Number one, to not risk pulling the plug away from the shank of where it's crimped, but enough to allow liquid to get down in the threads. And then we pour 1 ounce of the Chem Tool, the B12 Chem Tool from Berryman, into the hole of the spark plug. And we do that, and by the time we get around to all 8 of the plugs, we go back to the first one, and we turn it another 1/8 of a round, another 1 minute. Now, if it won't turn, we tighten it back up, and we wiggle and tease. But ultimately, what happens is it'll go 10 minutes, then 15 minutes. Next thing you know, you've got it turned 1/2 of a round. Once you got it turned 1/2 a round, then all of that B12 Chem Tool would run down into the threads and help to further soften the carbon. We extract the plug, we blow the cylinder out, we clean the threads out, and then we put new spark plugs in, and that is how you keep from breaking plugs in a spark plug. Hey, another great hour of Car Clinic coming up. Stay with me.
This is Bobby Likis Car Clinic. Bobby Likis Car Clinic is a copyrighted presentation of Car Clinic Productions Incorporated and may not be reproduced or rebroadcast without the express written approval of Car Clinic Productions Incorporated.